A teenager replaced love with OSU mapping. This is what happened to his brain. HC is an 18-year-old man presenting to the emergency room, unconscious. His hallmates tells the admitting nurse that HC had been acting differently over the past few weeks, but no one could be sure about what had been happening. HC was an OSU mapper. When he was 15, out of what he thought was boredom, he had got into creating OSU maps to distract from his school life. An OSU map is a rhythm game level for the game OSU, which is a community-driven rhythm game. He had always been playing OSU on and off. When playing shooter games with his friends, OSU was always that game that everyone played on the side. It had a unique selling point. Every level was community-made, with ranked maps amassing millions of plays, but initially, HC didn't think anything of it. When he was 15, he noticed that the days were beginning to slip him by. He saw a group of players talking about how OSU mapping was really difficult. They linked a YouTube video supposedly proving its inaccessibility, but HC was intrigued. You see, HC was a bright student. He had high grades in science and maths, but that came with a catch. Being the kid who always knew the answer, he felt increasing pressure from his peers to not just overachieve, but to overachieve without effort. Others would use him as a ceiling, with students counting difficult tests not out of the total, but of the amount that HC got right. School was becoming boring, and his lack of studying, or any after-school routine, left him feeling the same. Day in, day out. He noticed that unlike playing OSU, which required luck and physical ability, mapping was a creative skill, which only a few have mastered. Upon spending the entire day watching mapping videos, he felt convinced that it was easier than it looked. Perhaps this was the solution to his boredom. He had been successful in school, without trying. Mapping might be the same, he thought. As the months passed, his parents noticed differences in his mood and behavior. He would get defensive over his excessive computer usage. He would be mapping deep into the night, occasionally so engrossed he would forget to sleep. He would discuss his exhausting actions ironically on internet chat rooms, repeatedly using self-defeating humor in place of meaningful conversation. Twitter, which previously was only used to browse artwork, was now habitually checked even during his classes. But despite the lack of schoolwork, he did well enough to get into a decent university, if only just. His biggest concern was that if he broke his routine, then someone else would become a ranked mapper in less time, and all this work would be for nothing. He knew that mapping more would lead to better maps, but his advantage that he so strongly envisioned in his mind began to slip. One day, after over 2 years of mapping, he had ranked a map. With 2 more maps with a nomination each, things were looking up. He felt high, like standing on stilts. It was a foreign feeling, and yet one that made sense to him, as HC wrote very long Discord messages to his nominators thanking them. As the weeks passed, HC's second map was ranked. It wasn't as exciting now, he thought, because he wouldn't go the entire day thinking about it. He noticed that his days were beginning to slip, just like from years before. He had forgotten if he had eaten or not that day. He had forgotten if he had eaten at all. Hallmates noticed his increasingly erratic and sparse sleeping times. Social events that he would shyly participate in were unable to adjust to his chaotic schedule. HC felt his heartbeat in his ears and his brain spinning in his skull as he repeatedly refreshed his notifications during a lecture. He could feel a hint of regret walking down the stairs, with even the artificial light from his phone burning his retinas. He saw his third map enter the qualification queue as the last thing he could remember falling forwards. His hallmate next to the lecture hall found HC unconscious at the bottom of the stairs, his skin cold to the touch with a large bruise on his forehead. 911 is called, and he's brought to the emergency room, where we are now. At examination, doctors noticed that HC's body mass index was a little low. His weight was lower than his ideal body weight, which is a calculated and standardized clinical measure based on height and is used for things like dosing medicines. Initially, doctors dismissed this discrepancy, as body mass index tends to be inaccurate for unusually thin body shapes, of which HC, a computer science student, was one. But what they were sure of was from the description of his injury. His symptoms shouldn't be this severe. The bruise on his forehead was swelling but wasn't turning black. His hallmate mentioned his head injury to the admitting nurse. This explains the bruise, but if this is the case, it's been hours since the bruise formed, and the blood beneath the skin should have begun to clot. A blood test revealed HC has hypoglycemia. Hypo meaning low. Glyce from Greek, meaning sweet and referring to glucose, a name for sugar used as energy in the human body. And emia meaning presence in blood. Low sugar presence in blood. This could explain why HC remained unconscious for the hours since his admission. Usually, sugar in the blood comes from the digestion of food, which is metabolized into glucose to be used by cells in your body, including for repairs. Notably, the brain, with few exceptions, can only be powered by glucose. If HC hasn't been eating, the glycogen stores in his body, the main body store of glucose, have likely been depleted. This puts the body into ketosis, where instead of glucose, fatty acids are broken down into ketones, which your brain can use instead of glucose. This metabolic state is called ketosis, which causes headache, fatigue, dizziness, and insomnia. All symptoms HC was experiencing, but a simple lack of eating doesn't explain everything. From two of his hallmates who stayed with the resident nurse explaining his situation and a urine test, it gave doctors some more clues as to what's happening. Doctors find protein in HC's urine, suggesting a problem with the kidneys. His urine was also extremely concentrated, suggesting dehydration, providing a potential cause of his kidney damage. They hook HC up to be rehydrated intravenously, but it was soon that things turned for the worse. As urination picked back up, his urine was cloudy and bright red, suggesting severe damage to the kidneys. Also, the ketosis that doctors assumed HC was under doesn't explain the massive amount of protein present in his urine. If this is the case, then the body might be in an extreme state of malnutrition. HC was already a skinny person, and any fat stores he may have are completely empty. If there is no fat left for ketosis, then the body only has the proteins making up individual cells to digest for energy, called catabolism. As HC's vital organs scramble desperately for energy, his body is literally digesting itself apart. But if he hasn't been eating enough, then shouldn't he be hungry? People regularly go into states of low blood sugar, but typically only for a few hours, detecting low glucose levels, the hypothalamus in the brain, which controls body temperature, thirst, and importantly hunger, sends the impulse to eat a burger. It is possible to extend this during fasts with willpower, but for some, this can be taken too far. Pathological fasting, or more generally pathological eating patterns, are a form of eating disorder where a psychological need outweighs a physiological need to eat. This includes overeating, and in the case of HC, undereating, with severe cases being known as anorexia. But cases of anorexia are usually tied to body image problems. While men are also affected due to unrealistic images of masculine body types, HC didn't seem likely. He was an avid gamer and was accustomed to a chronic lack of respect, found in literature as cringe. The reason wasn't an excess of willpower, but the exact opposite. Willpower is often misunderstood and confused with motivation. While they are both used cognitively to achieve a goal, where motivation and willpower come from are radically different. Willpower is a cognitive loan. When you sit down to finish the essay for a deadline, you are in essence deciding that an extra hour of pain now is necessary to avoid a greater pain then. Motivation instead comes from routine. You don't brush your teeth because you will yourself to do so, but because it is part of your routine. While school is the source of this routine for many people, it is because of HC's special needs as a high achiever that this routine was not taught effectively. He has relied on willpower to cognitively finance his hobbies and interests, but with OSU mapping, this unsustainable debt was finally repaid. No high, no matter the magnitude, could possibly replenish the years of self-esteem he had self-deprived himself for. Without any willpower to do anything, and disillusioned enough to feel lost in time, HC literally forgot to eat or drink. Back in the hospital, doctors were deciding on the best treatment for HC. When in a fasting state, the body becomes hypersensitized to insulin. This causes any significant meal to have nutrients and electrolytes sucked into cells, depriving vital organs of nutrients. This is called refeeding syndrome, and despite fasting being a widespread religious practice, has only recently appeared in literature. If the doctors give HC too much nutrients, then his body might go into shock. If the doctors give too little, they risk his body's catabolism causing permanent damage. Luckily, with careful consultation with HC's hallmates, they could trace his eating history and plot the best course for a proper recovery. Loneliness is a sensitive topic. It may feel self-defeating to announce loneliness as a problem, as if there is a reason why no one wants to be around you. In 2010, 60% of 18 to 34-year-olds in the UK say they often feel lonely, and this number has risen sharply over the pandemic. The internet has enabled unparalleled access to international friends and communities, but research has shown that nothing replaces in-person meetings. For HC, being put into a revered position which he had to defend in school prevented him from socializing casually without a motive, where most of our social skills and intuitions are learnt. But with the OSU community giving him an outlet to fully express himself, those moments he was deprived of during school were returned to him. As he awoke for the first time in 17 hours, he was surprised to find 4 of his hallmates snoring by his side, waiting for his return. Without realizing it, his community-driven heart has attracted the minds of those around him. With careful monitoring and care, and supportive family and friends, HC was able to make a full recovery. Take care of yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and be well.